Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis. And we have an interesting set of 6 to 7 articles out of the Hindu newspaper Delhi edition, which we have to discuss. So good evening to all of you. Now, before we begin, let's look at the topics which we have to cover, which is first, we'll talk about a very interesting concept with regards to gender and labor, something quite interesting pointed out by Data Point. Thereafter, we'll discuss a article which gives us a lot of arguments, but because the G Ramji Act has been in the news, we need to discuss what are the criticisms and what is the justification which the government of India is giving with regards to it. Then we'll talk about export. Again, a very interesting article with regards to export, labor, and development. Very important with regards to GS paper 3. These two topics are quite good. This topic is also related to GS paper 1 because it talks about women and the workforce in that regard. Then we'll talk about maternity, what is called maternal mortality rate and how it has improved. Two topics related to the SIR, which has recently happened in Kerala, Chhattisgarh, and in MP. And last, we'll talk about a very important personality related to Hindi literature passing away at the age of 88. So, the 50% offer ends tonight. Remember, and you have to use the use the code IS English to be tagged to our team. So use this opportunity to become a part of our family. Now, the first topic is quite interesting because it deals with four things which have been in the news, but it contextualizes in the context of gender. What I mean by that is, for example, there has been a lot of talk about AI, how artificial intelligence is going to take away jobs from skilled labor, how it is already leading to a lot of automation, and therefore jobs are threatened by AI. This is the first aspect which has been talked about. Then, because of Narayan Murthy and a lot of different aspects in and around this, the 70-hour, 90-hour work week has been also in the news in that regard. And the debate is that in one space we are talking about jobs will be taken away, in the other space we are saying that in the age of AI we need to work more. Now, taking a middle line here, the article talks about the impact of both of these narratives on women, meaning, are women part of the 70 to 90 hour you can say workspace or work week narrative? And at the same point of time, what is the impact of AI, or what will be the impact of AI on women in that regard? This is a very interesting dichotomy which is being talked about here, and we'll try to look at it from data or the data point. There's a certain survey which has recently been, you can say, conducted, and which gives us this data. So at the same point of time where we are having 80-hour week concept with artificial intelligence, women are caught up in a different type of understanding it, which is the paid versus unpaid aspect of their existence. This is a very important point you have to understand, which is unpaid work which is done by women, which is caregiving, which is elderly care, which is the child care, which is what they do as sisters, which they do as mothers, they do as wives. That is increasing and the paid work is decreasing. And though the paid work may be within the hours of 40 to 50 hours, they are doing they are doing close to similar hours within the unpaid space itself. And that is where there's a very interesting concept that AI is not helping the unpaid aspect of women, and at the same point of time taking away the opportunity from the paid aspect. So let's try to understand this from the data which has been given by the article itself. See, the time use survey which of 2024 talks about how 40% to 50% of the time which the women spend as a labor in a labor force in that regard is going into what is called as unpaid labor. What we mean by that is, see, look at the two data points here. On the left hand side, we have men. On the right hand side, we have women. Now, if you look at the men, if this is the age bracket 15, 19 till 55 to 59, the average work week or the average work done by a man on a daily basis is 8.6 hours. Out of that 8.6 hours, the unpaid aspect, which they do outside the office, is 1.4 hours to 1.6 hours maximum. So within that 8.6 hours, 1.4 to 1.6 hours is going into unpaid aspect. If you contrast this with women in the same age brackets, in 25 to 29, 30 to 34, and 35 to 39, women firstly are doing more work than men from 8.6 to 9.6, 1 hour more. But what is interesting is that if you look at the amount of unpaid work which they are doing, it is 40 to 50% of that 9 hours. So they are not productive within the economy itself because they are spending 5 hours in the office, then 5 hours of work at home also. So in the 25 to 39 bracket, their work hours are exceeding more than 70, and their work goes into domestic chores, cooking, cleaning, voluntary work, and what is called as family labor itself. Family labor itself. And this is a very interesting aspect because this you can use for society, this you can use for concept of gender justice. You can thereafter also use this from the economic perspective. For the first time, we have clarity with regards to what the women are going through, which is when we are talking about 80 hours of work, women are already doing 80 hours, but majority of it is in the unpaid space where they are not accounted for only. And over and above that, men remain a worker and then become a husband, but the work is only of 1 to 2 hours. But women, they always remain mothers, sisters, and wives, even when they are trying to balance. So the private sector, the privatization, the economic opportunity which comes to women comes at a cost. Now the question is, how are women able to balance this? And the answer comes from a very, very dangerous concept, which is that they are able to balance it because they reduce their sleep. So, when it comes to the trade off for men within unpaid, paid, and sleep, they are not trading off their sleep. But women, because of their unpaid work, they take a hit in the hours of sleep in that regard. And this is where women are sleeping on an average lesser than men. And at the same point of time, they do not have enough time for self care. So the gap is 2 to 2.5 hours a week when it comes to the, you can say, sleep gap. So, what the article has pointed out is two very fundamental things. Obviously, you will never be able to remember this data for the examination. Two very interesting things. Firstly, paid and unpaid. For women, for women, paid is lower than unpaid in most cases. They are spending more time in unpaid, as it is that is not getting accounted for in the GDP. Therefore, their contribution is not even accounted for. At the same point of time, they are getting sleep also lower than men. Men, on an average, are spending 2 hours of unpaid work. Women, on an average, are spending 6 hours of work unpaid. And this trade off of 4 hours is made in sleep itself. So, the conclusions of this article are quite interesting because they give you insight into gendered aspect of time, space, and contribution to economy. So, the women in India, on an average, spend 10 hours less than men every week on self development, learning, skill enhancement, self awareness practices, which in turn creates a gap, which in turn has also an impact in the new disruptive markets of AI. Because they are not able to skill themselves in AI, their jobs are the most vulnerable to self development, the aspect of AI development, and new forms of development. So, again, we get a very interesting picture. Women are spending 6 hours approximately in unpaid work. That leads to a trade off over sleep. At the same point of time, they do not get access to self care or time to do self care, and they are not able to do self development. They're not able to skill themselves. When they are not able to do these aspects, when we talk about AI will thereafter take away the same jobs for which women are working for. And because of this lack of skill development, they are not able to become part of the AI economy itself. So it becomes a vicious circle for them. They have to work more, but in jobs which are redundant and obsolete, and AI can take it away, and they also have to reduce their sleep. So women in India are facing major issues when it comes to how their work is perceived, looked at, and accounted for in the economy itself. This is where the article points out major issues which exist. Firstly, most of the women are outside the labor market because of domestic duty. They believe that if they leave the household, who will make the food, who will take care of the children, and women have to always give up their jobs when it comes to childbirth or when it comes to any form of caregiving. This in turn leads them to not be a part of the labor force and then become even bigger part of unpaid work in that regard. Thereafter, there is more and more, or you can say more and more women are getting linked up to low paying jobs or unpaid jobs because of lack of skill development. Either they're part of family labor, a labor is going to a construction site, he's taking his wife together, she's doing unskilled, very rudimentary work for some amount of money, and therefore work, or what is called as workforce participation, in turn does not mean that they're actually empowered. At the same point of time, automation and AI risk, they are the most prone to when it comes to AI automation and any form of shift fundamentally in any structure. At the same point of time, what does empowerment actually mean? What does what does empowerment actually mean? Because if empowerment equals to employment, then the nature and the quality of employment is equally important. Here the question is, just job creation is not enough. Quality of job creation is very. So if we add all of this into, and we can create a certain mind map here, we can talk about women in the workforce. And I do this in front of you because I want you to learn how to make mind maps in this session itself. So they are sleep deprived, unpaid work is more, and self care is again less, and at the same point of time, skill development is less. So therefore, the threat of AI is real on women because that automation is going to impact their jobs. At the same point of time, women are citing domestic work. They are part of unpaid labor force, and at the same point of time, nature of work is redundant, or you can say obsolete. And at the same point of time, they are also in a phase where we believe employment equals to empowerment. Employment equals to empowerment. This is not technically true. This is not technically true. So now comes the $1 million question in this whole concept, which is, what is the way forward? But this article is quite invaluable because this aspect is GS paper 1, this aspect is GS paper 3, and this aspect is GS paper 2, which is governance. So a certain topic can intersect all three GS papers: society, economy, and governance. Now, how do we move forward? First is time is the biggest point which women are voting for not becoming part of the labor force. So the productivity is unrecognized. So we need to create policies where women's time is recognized and redesigned and more space is given. So we need a redesigning of the workspace itself. Second, we have policy approach, wherein you need to move from input based to outcome based design, wherein you make sure that the women have free time, but at the same point of time, they have more paid activities in the workforce itself, and we have to reduce their unpaid understanding. Manisha will talk about that. Gendered budgeting, which is the budget needs to, this is a very well known concept that there has to be a certain amount of budget allocated to creating jobs which are women centric and don't, in a way, burden their overall workload. We also have to create time saving infrastructure, meaning childcare, elderly care can be done within the workforce and the workspace itself with certain crèche features. Further, we need piped water, safe transportation so that they don't spend most of their money in either traveling or being fearful of some form of harassment. At the same point of time, their their work should also be made better. They should be skilled so that they are not, in a way, they are immune to this AI shift. And last but not the least is we need a targeted initiative. So when we talk about way forward, the way forward is giving them more time, changing the nature of their work, policy interventions, creating infrastructure which helps them, at the same point of time having targeted features and targeted, you can say, initiatives for them. So this whole article is a complete article in itself because it tells you the problem, the reason, and the way forward. And hybrid model of work would incentivize their potential, Manisha. But the problem is in hybrid mode also, women are then expected to do more unpaid work. If she's in the household, she will do unpaid work. If she's in the office, she still has to do unpaid work. This is where the unpaid aspect of her existence does not decrease either way. If she's work from home, she will work from home also. She will do the work in the home also. So work from home, work in home, in the end, the unpaid aspect will increase. Rather, we have to create a structure in which they are, firstly, we account for their unpaid work, and also at the same point of time, create structure in which it is not the job of the man of the woman only to take care of the children. There has to be structural behavioral changes where there is more equality and more equity in the relationship. So, very yes, it does. It does, Rekha. It does at a very fundamental level. The mental health of and the physical health of women is impacted even more. And when we talk about maternity benefits, when we talk about benefits which are given, in most cases, women are either fired or incentivized to leave the job so that they don't become a burden on the company, quote unquote. So the point is that what this article points out is there's a fundamental issue within the workforce. Men are doing you can say more paid work than women. Women are doing more unpaid work. But the total number of hours is equal. Therefore, we believe that men are contributing more to the GDP also, which is technically not true. Because somebody else would have to do the unpaid work also. And when men are doing the unpaid work, they are given a salary for it. So therefore, it's a paradoxical position where the unpaid work is close to 40 to 50% of their work, but is also not accounted for properly. So in the examination, you can get a question like this, which is directly picked up from this article. It's a very interesting way of putting all of this. Until women's time is valued, freed, and mainstreamed in policy and growth strategy, India's 2047 Viksit Bharat mission will remain constrained by women's invisible labor, time poverty, and underutilized potential. Comment. So, very simply, you can't answer this type of question can't, true, Manisha, can't answer this type of question until and unless you don't understand this issue of time deficit, time poverty, invisible work because of the way they add value to the economy, but it is not accounted for, and underutilized potential because they're wasting their time more in unpaid work. If there is a little bit of parity, they get more space, they will sleep better, their mental health will be better, their physical health will be better. So I hope you are now capable of writing an answer like this. Very important article, very interesting article intersecting two to three different aspects of your preparation. Are we clear about this? Are we clear about this? Yes or no? We'll then move on to the second one. Yes. Okay. Now, the second article is not important per se, but it is important because it is written by the Union Minister of Agriculture, and it is a certain, you can say, article which tries to answer the critiques. You can write it in 250 words, Manish. There is a lot of critique, there's a lot of, you can say, slander which has been pushed towards the VBG Ramji Act of 2025. And as it replaces the MG Narega program in that regard, Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Act, there have been a lot of questions which have come to. So this is trying to answer that. Now, first, let's try to understand what are the fundamental changes which Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin Act actually does. So yes, you can use it, Ishita. You can easily use it for prelims and mains. So let's try to understand how is it fundamentally different from what we know as the MG Narega Act. Now, under MG Narega, under MG Narega, the amount of work which was guaranteed was not less than 100 days. This has been revised to 125 days of wage employment per rural household per fiscal year. Now, what is interesting is, though there was legal flexibility of having more than 100 plus days in a certain rural sector, the de facto software which was used in Amji Narega would not take more than 100 days. So even if there was employment available more than 100 days, the software would not take more than 100 days. And further, you could use 50 additional days under Section 3(4) and make it 150 under disaster and drought understanding. So what the G Ramji Act does is it removes all these constraints and straight away says 125 days can be used, and the need for 100 plus a trigger plus a certain, you can say, sub clause is not needed. This is very interesting that this is a good, you can say, good aspect of this act, that the 100 has been made into 125, but no conditioning over drought, disaster, or scheduled tribe or forest areas understanding. At the same point of time, the major change, I'll discuss all the major changes. The next major change in MG Narega and GRAMG is that MG Narega 100% paid unskilled cost was on the center. The states were only going to give unemployment allowance, one fourth of material cost, and administrative expenses. However, under GRAMG, what happens is this becomes a more centrally sponsored and center sector concept in that. In northeastern states, Himalayan states, and UTs with legislature, it is 90-10. 90% center, 10% state. In all other states and UTs with legislature, you have what is called as 60-40, which is more closer to centrally sponsored, and it is 100% in UTs without legislature. This is a fundamental shift because now at least 10% or 40% of the cost has to be borne by the state itself. These two are considered to be, other than other subtle changes with regards to how it cannot impact or intersect with agricultural working days and all. two major provisions have been changed: 100 days to 125 unskilled rural household per fiscal year, plus the aspect of how the budgeting happens for some. Now, the article tries to deal with all the criticism and gives us a certain comparative table. What is the larger issue in space? What is the criticism made? And what does the union minister argue? So, first argument which has been given by the critic is welfare and development have now become opposite to each other. Here, the union minister would argue that no, infrastructure, income, support, agriculture, productivity, all have been taken into consideration. And when we talk about guarantee of employment, there's no dilution per se with regards to legal and the justiciable right of getting this 125 days. Rather, it has been increased. It has become been more straightforward. At the same point of time, it was believed that previously it was demand driven. How much work was there in the rural sector? Now it is top down. But with regards to top down, still village participation, gram panchayats, gram sabhas are taken into consideration, wherein people were arguing that GRAMG is more centralized. But that technically not true, because gram panchayat plans and gram sabha plans have to be taken into consideration. So it is a centralized, decentralized concept. At the same point of time, with regards to budgeting, it is believed that the central budget has always been increasing. It has increased from 33,000 crores in 2013 to 86,000 crores in 2024-25, but it was stagnant here with nearly the personal days nearly being doubled. With regards to poor execution, it is being believed that from the center side, though there are claims by West Bengal and other states that a lot of money was stopped under certain sections 125, 126. The idea is very simple. If Aadhaar authentication is there and Aadhaar payment was there, 99% of the workers did get the payment. Further, with regards to what is called as fiscal restructuring, it is believed that states should also contribute into GRAMG because they would then become more connected to the system rather than just getting funds from the state itself, from the center itself. And the flexibility aspect and the agricultural, you can say, balance aspect. The argument is given is that states can notify their own schemes and agricultural days will not be taken away. This is where you have to understand that because it has been written from the perspective of the union minister itself, we can't take everything on face value. But if we get an article which is or rather if we get a question which is positively indicating or is positively bent, for example, GRAMG Act tries to bring structural changes and fill the loopholes, you should be able to answer that question. You should be able to. You should be able to say how it is different from MG Narega. And there can be further can say positively understood. So, yes, see, Manisha, the point is, as of right now, our perspective in this article, there are counterpoints, they are all very, very legitimate. That that new policy gives state more autonomy to deny work at their whims and fancies. That is a counterpoint. But see, the point is, this has been written from a center's perspective. Employment was being denied on multiple grounds under the center also. Now, more power has been shifted towards the state. The administrative discretion and the administrative corruption at the lowest level does not change. But the point is, if there's a positively, you can say, worded question, we can't just write negative which is more in the news than positive. I'm not telling you to just praise MG, what is called GRAMG. I'm telling you that if you are asked a question something like this, you may need this data somewhere. You may need. Totally true, Vikas. It is centralizing power with the state and with the center. And at the same point of time, states will have more discretionary power with regards to funds. Further, the Gram Panchayat and the Gram Sabhas are considered to be secondary to this whole concept. But you should also know the positive point. Not that we are supporting we as it is. are nobody to support or deny. But G Ramji, you should have an aspect where what is the justification which the government is giving. We are not going to take this. I've given you the baseline here. We are not going to take this on face value per se. I hope that you realize that this article has been written in a positive sense only because it is coming from the government itself. But we will not take it in face value. At the same point of time, when positive and negative comes, we take the positive points from here. In a critical analysis question, you need both positive and negative. So where does the positive points come from? They come from this article. I hope you get the point and you hope you understand the whole concept, why we are doing it. Obviously, he is going to justify it. Obviously, he's going to, there's been a lot of, you can say, justifications coming from the government itself. When they can play with the Supreme Court has intervened, play with the meaning of a forest and Aravali's could come under threat. This is nothing. So Tarak, Manisha, Vikas, all valid points, fully valid, but some positive points also for the examination for critical analysis. For critical analysis. Uh, History classes plus class is going to start in the next 1.5 months. Okay. Now, are we all clear about this? As I said, I don't want to go into the minute details of the justification because they make us then become extremely connected to the justification, which makes no sense when we have to take a mid path. Are we on the same page? Can we move to the third article? Equally interesting, more theoretical, will help you in understanding GS paper 3 better. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, before we talk about the third article, I have to explain to you certain theory here. You have to understand it in order to. It's a very, very heavy article. It's an economy, you can say, economy point as it's called, economic point article. It's very heavy in its, you can say, jargonization also and the terms also. But I'll try to make sense for you for it with regards to UPSC perspective. Now, first, what you have to understand is there's something called exports. We all understand that. And exports are a good indicator of how the economy is expanding or contracting, and also is a good indicator of your forex equally as your currency. Now, though our currency has slid to the record lows now, the point is that our export is at the highest point it could be within this fiscal in that regard. Now, export as an indicator is a partial indicator. Because if you look at India as a unit, the argument being pushed is with worsening rupee, our export numbers look very impressive. But it is impressive for India. If I go to the regional origin of these exports, the West and the South are the two hotspots in which the exports are actually happening. Most of North and East are not export hubs. So, first point which is being made by this article is aggregates which are national may sometimes not take into account regional disparities. And second is a very standard logic which is used in economic history and even in economics is that when there will be rise of exports, there will be a rise of manufacturing, for example. That is in a way of saying it that manufacturing leads to exports, which would mean that factories would also start to increase. So, can you tell me what would be the impact on labor? Labor demand, according to this logic, should go up or down. If exports are increasing, manufacturing will increase. If manufacturing is increasing, factories will be increasing. Factories are increasing. So, labor demand should be increasing or decreasing. Logically, labor demand should be increasing, right? Because you need more for factories, more for manufacturing, for export. But what this article points out after looking at the data from the RBI is that labor demand is rather going down or stagnated whilst exports are increasing. There's a word which is used in history which is called structural transformation, migrated to the concept of economics also. There's a word called structural transformation. Structural transformation means labor moving out of one sector into another, meaning when it moves from primary to secondary, it is industrial revolution. When it moves from secondary to tertiary, it is a tertiary based economy. Structural transformation means labor profile is changing. It is believed that exports lead to, along with manufacturing, structural transformation, with more people coming out of rural sector to urban sector. That is the pure definition of structural transformation. Structural transformation means rural labor goes down, urban labor relatively increases with the decrease in rural. That is called structural transformation. That is a very important indicator for industrialization of an economy. So, manufacturing should automatically mean structural transformation. But again, looking at the export data, it is not actually coming into forefront. Now that you know what is structural transformation, let's try to understand what this article is trying to argue. Based on the Handbook of Statistics on Indian States 2024-25, the first conclusion which has been brought in by RBI is India is becoming more and more lopsided when it comes to its cluster of states which are exporting. Five exporters: Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, are accounting for 70% of all national exports when it comes to the basket of exports itself. And this is where the export geography is becoming top heavy, and we are now having core areas and peripheral areas. Core area and core periphery is emerging, wherein the states such as Bihar, Jharkhand, MP, West Bengal previously was important, now is lagging. The northeastern states, the Chhattisgarh, these states, along with Rajasthan, for example, these states should have been catching up to, I'll answer that question, Sid, don't worry, should have been catching up to the core, which is these five states, but that is not happening. That is not happening. Rather, these states are going forward and these states are going backward. So the coastal belts of South and West are integrating tighter with the global supply chain, while the vast demographic heartland of North and East is effectively decoupling itself from the trade engine. This is called regional disparity. Only Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, and Gujarat are accounting for 70%. 30% is coming from here, and they are going further away from the export economy in that region. So, this is the first conclusion, that we have a lopsided geography, and therefore, exports number going up does not mean India is going forward. It means only these five states are going forward. I hope you understand this point. This is a totally different tangent altogether, wherein export does not equal to national growth. Export equals to certain geographies going forward, not the nation per se going forward. Do we understand this point? Sid, you can do that. You can do that. You can do that. All five themes are there. You can do that. And you can always write to mishra.abhishek@unacademy.com and we can have a discussion over it. No issues whatsoever. Right? Do we understand this point? We understand this point. Very good. Now, the next set of arguments made by this article are equally interesting. And those are a little bit more technical, but are quite interesting in saying how capital is moving within the world. So, previously, previously, there was a argument that capital is moving across the global market to places where there is cheap labor. This argument was based on how capital moved to China quite a lot. But research in the economic complexity of this world is showing us it is no longer based on just low cost of labor, but how complex the economies are and how connected they are to the larger global supply chain. That is why you will understand when you look at the FDI, the foreign direct investment into India, 96% of it is going to either Gujarat or Maharashtra. Reason for that is because they are not going for cheap labor of Bihar or of Jharkhand or of Chhattisgarh. They are going to a tightly connected export economy with a global supply chain. So capital now is not just seeking cheap labor, it is seeking a integrated approach of a economy with regards to how the high value chain is connected to each other. At the same point of time, the peripheral areas have created so many barriers that they are now getting decoupled by the entire value chain itself. Either be it wastage, be it political will, be it economic culture, be it behavioral. The problem is that now capital will not enter the 30% economy because they don't have the right space and they are more and more further away from the global supply chain. So the capital now goes to spaces which are ease of doing, have certain complex structures placed so as to make sure that they are connected to the global supply chain better. And then the third major point which this article makes, very interesting, is about labor and structural transformation. Is about labor and structural transformation. See, it is believed that if export boom was truly labor intensive, meaning export, this concept which we discussed here, export should automatically lead to labor boom. This is not true because then there would have been a structural shift in the work which is being done at the factory level. However, what we see is still total employment in the manufacturing sector is only at 11.6% to 12%. However, if you look at the export values that are high, this means that the elasticity, which is employment change, with respect to export growth has collapsed. The jobs being created is not in labor absorbing factories, but in capital intensive hubs. More and more automation is happening, more and more AI driven development is happening. Therefore, export equals to labor growth does not automatically come true today in that regard. It is not automatically true. And therefore, export in India no longer operates as a lever of structural but rather it is now becoming an indicator of structural transfer. States that are not exporting or states do not export to into development, meaning states don't export their way into development, rather they are already doing so because they're developed enough. And export performance is increasingly a mirror of accumulated industrial wealth rather than a path towards industrialization or wealth in that regard. If export linked industrial policy may longer not generate labor intensive employment, therefore, we need to re examine our approach, meaning we should not just be looking for these indicators as indicators of growth and development in India because it is an illusion which is being created. Now, I've made a lot of points. Let me try to consolidate what is the argument of this article. We talk about exports as an indicator of growth. Talk about exports as an indicator of growth. First issue which has been pointed out is geographical spread of this development or increase needs to be taken into account, wherein the five are dominating and 70% is with them. At the same point of time, it is arguing that capital investment is not dictated by only labor cost. It is now more integrated by the idea of economic value chain and supply chain complexity. At the same point of time, exports have ceased to be an tool of or a tool of structural transformation, and developed are exporting more, and that is leading to investment also being high there, and this leads to a lopsided, or we'll say you can say a problematic understanding in using export data as an indicator of development and growth. I hope you understand that it's a complex article, but if you're able to understand these 4 or 5 points, then we are sorted for this article, and then you are capable of writing the following concepts also. Yes, sir. Reinforcing the importance of growth manufacturing by making a comparison between states who are manufacturing up. No. Astitva, it is rather saying that it is not making a point. It is just saying that industrial growth does not equal to labor participation. This is because manufacturing hubs will automatically not lead to more and more labor being used, because manufacturing can be now automated. What the main point of the article is, if we are using export data as an indicator of economic prosperity, then our outcomes and our indicators are incorrect. Meaning, if they ask the question, for example, the danger is not that India misses global opportunity, but it is that it perhaps is measuring progress using a metric that is increasingly reflecting past advantages rather than future inclusion. Comment. This is the whole point. The point is that these states, the non five states, are not going to go forward because of the same processes which helped the five to go forward. Because the nature of capital has changed, the nature of industries has changed. What worked 20 years back for Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka will not work for these states because capital will not go there. And more than that, there will be no investment there because they are not connected to the global supply chain. So it is big, the rich becoming richer, the poor becoming poorer. I hope you understand this point, Ritva, because that is where the article is quite interesting. It is saying that I am basically checking the progress of your marks based on how good your schooling is. I am comparing somebody who's done a PhD in political science vis-a-vis a person who's not even touched political science in their life. Maybe the processes which helped you do a PhD is not going to help the person who's not done a PhD in political science. Meaning there's now it's a totally different world. So very simply, you have to understand that there is more to this story than just looking at the basic indicator. So I hope that this article is totally sorted. Omar, you can, as I said, write to mishra.abhishek@unacademy.com. I'll be happy to let you know or explain to you what is the concept. Surely, no issues whatsoever. Right? Can we move to the now more prelims oriented topics? 10-15 minutes more, and we'll be done with this understanding and concept. Yes, yes. One. Okay. Doubt. Now, there were three articles in this paper which are all dealing with the systematic revision of the electoral roll which is happening in three major states in India right now: Kerala, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh, along with one UT which is Andhra Pradesh. And out of the data which has come out of the data of deletions, 95 lakh names, close to 1 crore people have been excluded from the draft electoral rolls in that regard. 24 lakh in Kerala, close to 27 lakh in Chhattisgarh, and 42 lakh in MP, 64,000 in Andhra Pradesh. Now, per se, this data is not important, but let's look at the reasons why these names have been dropped. The number of people who have been excluded in Kerala are 24 lakh, out of which 66 lakh are non-traceable, cannot be, they're not there only at you can say the household or the address. 8 lakh have permanently shifted. But this 8 lakh should get added somewhere if they're being subtracted somewhere. 6 lakh 50,000 are dead. These are proper exclusion. 1 lakh 36,000 were duplicate entries. This should also be an exclusion. And 1 lakh 60,000 are because they refused to accept the forms itself. So out of this data, genuinely close to 7 to 8 lakh people are missing. Out of that, this 8 lakh value should be in a way be seen as dispersing. If they're shifted, they would have shifted somewhere. Either they become diasporic population or they shifted to other parts of India. So an exclusion here should be inclusion somewhere, which we are not seeing though. And at the same point of time, 6 lakh people are non-accounted for in Kerala. If I look at the data for Chhattisgarh, I see another pattern, which is there is exclusion of 27 lakh people in the first phase, out of which duplicates are 1.8 lakh, shifted voters is 19 lakh, dead 6 lakh. So highest exclusion is 70%. Again, Chhattisgarh, if this number, these 19 lakh people should have gone somewhere, right? So if overall our number of voters in India should only decrease by the number who are dead or who have shifted outside as diasporic population, at the same point of time, we have to account for the people who are absent. Let's take the margin of error to be with regards to absent and dead in that regard. But the total number of voters cannot reduce just by shifting. That is the whole point here. And if you go to MP, total deletion is 42 lakh, out of which dead are 8 lakh. So you can see 6 to 8 lakh people are dead, which is consistent across India. And 31 lakh have shifted. Duplication 2.7. Now again, this shifted category is becoming very interesting. Have they shifted to another constituency? Have they shifted within the state? Have they shifted to another state? Have they shifted to the US? Have they shifted to the Gulf? Where have they shifted? And if they're shifted, they would be enumerated somewhere else. So 95 lakh people, majority of that number, 80% of that number is basically shifting. So by mathematical logic, will every SIR or should every SIR lead to decrease in voters, or there will come a time that we will see a little bit of, you can say, break even? You tell me. If I do SIR in every state and UT, and in every state and UT, if I see a decrease, then it is problematic, because if there is shifting, then either the Delhi number should go up, either the numbers in, for example, Maharashtra should go up, either the numbers in Punjab should go up. So there has to be a pattern where there's a decrease, but there has to be an increase somewhere also. This pattern has still not emerged in the larger scheme of things, and that is the interesting part of this discussion. that looking at comparative data of SIRs, we are not able to see a certain balance which should be there. So I don't know what you do with this data, but simple straightforward point is this is an overall trend which is emerging wherein absent shifted voters are the main voters who are not accounted for. We have one more article which deals with an interesting set of data, which is that maternal mortality rate, which is the death of the mother, has significantly reduced in India because institutional deliveries in India has become 89%. The article has nothing else to say or nothing else to argue other than this point. Other than this point, that 89% institutional delivery has led to decrease in the MMR. The act of CM of Bihar without naming him, Manisha, don't. Politically charged understanding, never. Don't use live examples. You don't know what is the understanding of that person who's reading it, right? The sensibilities are very, very different in different spaces. Now, I hope that you are clear about what we've learned today. I'll repeat it for you. What we've discussed per se today are 4 or 5 very interesting things. We have understood that G Ramji Act has made certain changes which can be justified in the government's eye: 125 days, 90, 10, 60, 40, and the concept of 100%. And thereafter, we have also understood that gendered impact of what is called as work: 70 hours work, unpaid work more for women, they are sleeping less. At the same point of time, the way forward is changing the infrastructure and the workspace nature. Third, we've discussed what is called the concept of exports and how they should not be taken as an indicator of overall growth. Geographically spread does not lead to manufacturing and labor intensive development. Capital's nature has changed, so therefore we need better indicators. Then we have discussed the SIR data, and a pattern emerged that the most amount of deletions have happened in absent and shifted. And we also now know that 89% of all births are happening within the institutional space, which is basically 89% of institutional deliveries in turn leads to better MMR. So we end this discussion on the note of the death of a very renowned Jnanpith awardee, Vinod Kumar Shukla, who recently passed away, and the Prime Minister tweeted about it also. He is a very renowned Hindu poet, 2024 Jnanpith awardee. He was born in 1937, colonial India, and he is known to have published his first collection of poems in what is called as the Lagbhag Jai Hind. And thereafter, he has penned multiple different, you can say, texts which are quite important, or what you call as Hindi poetries in that sense. कवित कविता से लंबी कविता, दीवार में एक खिड़की रहती है, नौकर की कमीज. And he is a Sahitya Academy winner, along with the first Chhattisgarh writer to get the Jnanpith Award, the highest literary honor which can be given to any poet or literati in India. So, on this note, we have covered the 7 articles which we set out to cover for today. I hope all of this makes sense. From the export article, can we make points? Yes, yes, yes. You can do that. You can do that. You can talk about jobless growth. You can talk about export not being a good indicator of economic development per se. So I hope that this has been insightful and helpful session for you. Thank you and take care. Tomorrow again, the session will come back to its time of 10 a.m. So thank you for your patience. Take care and bye bye.